Watch out. This is Resonant Being, streaming you some consciousness. You can see on this sign here, the light's not too bright. Fragile area. Stay on trail. This area I'm at, the Moss Landing area of the Monterey Bay in California, and Monterey Bay as a whole has a lot of conservation work going on. Now, I really like the area of conservation, and I'm fascinated by ecology and biology, but it's also an area that has a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of contradiction that at times could make walking the talk very difficult. I'd mentioned in another video, just touched on the idea of the solar panel industry and green technologies, with fleets of trucks going around delivering solar panels and fleets of salesmen driving from neighborhood to neighborhood, hustling them. And it's a contradiction because there's a large amount of fossil fuel pollution resulting from that to bring about the technological change. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it's just difficult because it's unwanted. And it's opposite of the effects trying to bring about solar panels are going for. In a lot of conservation efforts, we see this kind of challenge, this kind of contradictory scenarios. A really good example is in invasive species control and habitat restoration. Often the two go side by side. In California, especially in the coastal areas of Central California, two that come to mind are eucalyptus and ice plant. Now, eucalyptus are widespread around Central California, and as you may know, are native to Australia. They're a hardy plant. They're a flowering tree, hardy tree, that is well adapted to drought and also flood and cold weather, and they spread as analytical cartography is showing over the last 30 years. They spread that's not the word. They spread easily, vastly. I said a word that's not even a word. It don't matter. So now we have this large population of eucalyptus. And don't get me wrong, I love eucalyptus. And I also love didgeridoos that are made from eucalyptus branch. But the problem is that they compete and are even out-competing in some cases the native oak savanna forests that we have on the Central Coast. And the argument in conservation and habitat restoration is that we should try to preserve things as they are historically. That is to say, as they were before we arrived. And in the case of eucalyptus, before we intentionally planted them, to the idea was be used as timber for railroad beams and other types of hardwood needs, because eucalyptus is a very hard wood. It turned out, however, that it is such a hard wood that, and it is so twisty that it couldn't easily be milled and cut into the timber needed for the uses intended. And now we have this problem of it taking the place, outcompeting native oak habitat. It's a similar story with ice plant. Ice plant grows easily in this dune environment, of which there is a lot of in the Central Coast. And it is so well adapted to this dune environment that it is outcompeting much of the native dune plant species that we have around, such as these varieties of scrub brush you see. And it's easy to feel guilty about that as a person and feel like things should stay the way they were before we kind of unknowingly introduced these exotic species that are changing the whole ecosystems. I mean, the whole ecology of the place, the birds, other animals that live here grew in co-evolution with the plants. So when the dominant flora of an environment gets replaced by something different, that affects all the living organisms in the area. The hypocrisy of this is that everything always changes. The universe, all of existence and creation, is forever dynamic. And humans are not separate from anything going on Earth or in the whole of everything. We're not separate, we're a part of it. And therefore, anything we do is equally a part of it. So though it can be uncanny to see choices that we've made result in species dying, it is actually a result of nature, because there is nothing that is not nature, and there is nothing that does not change. The time scales of change vary greatly. For example, on the time span of our lives versus biological time, which is greater, or geological time, still greater yet, or cosmic time, even greater yet. So sometimes it almost seems that our efforts to implement programs like a stick in the mud trying to steer the course of a river, to borrow from the words of Daniel Quinn, sometimes it seems that our efforts and programs and all our tax dollars and all our hours of volunteers coming in, putting in their labors, and all the state and federal employees working hard on the land to put things back to a historical way, might be in vain, because everything's a part of this cosmic cycle. And all of conservation work might actually just be a product of our own difficulties in accepting change and death and new beginnings. At the same time, I still really love conservation work and environmental work, and ecology and biology, and I like things to stay the same too. So I'm preaching to the choir. But it's something to consider. And it goes back to the main theme that I'm covering here, is that rather than trying to jump the gun on making something happen because something else happened, or us always rushing about to be more comfortable and support ourselves in some kind of capacity, maybe the better thing to do is to live more simply, have less, and focus on living locally. Your happiness can come from within, and it's not dependent on products made from resources harvested from far off lands. Resonant beings, as always, be well.